Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to Looking Ahead, the series where I break down and analyze the meta, what's happening over Japan, and how that'll impact our one. As you know, LAIC happened this past weekend, and there was a ton of creativity kind of shown in there. Some really interesting decks kind of performing incredibly well in the top 8 in all of the divisions. But is that the case in Japan? In today's video, we're going to break down is creativity being rewarded in the Paradox Rift format. We've seen a ton of really cool archetypes shape over this week in the City League. Golden Go, Zorok, and even Giratina got a new tool to play with. So we're going to see how the meta really is evolving in Japan. But we're going to do that by breaking down the top 16 results over there in Japan by looking at the meta share, as well as also outlining what are the top 6 performing decks happening over there in Japan, and breaking down those creativity lists. Will these be incremented in the new regionals, happen even this weekend and the weekends to follow in this exciting Paradox Rift format? So if we look at this top 16 results, there was a little bit less City League play this weekend, but it really is eye-opening of how it's been performing. Charizard and Giratina still continue to perform incredibly well, as they are very, very popular there in Japan. They perform incredibly well over there in the best of one format, which is what they mainly play in. Charizard is definitely shifting towards the Pidgeot build, as we're seeing a lot less Path to the Peak, a lot less of that Devolution TM kind of going around there. Charizard can afford to go with the Pidgeot because why would you want to draw to 5 when you can just get any card you want to have per turn? Gardevoir is also a big shifting, going from 2% when Paradox Rift was legal all the way to nearly 14%. It is a massive increase. It's doing incredibly well by having a Scream Tail to that huge bench snipe capability, as well as also Iron Hands is as much of a threat as people might have thought of. Yes, it just won the Seniors and Master Division at LAIC, but Gardevoir is performing incredibly well because it can do a huge amount of damage and constantly be attacking with single prizes, which has an incredible matchup against, you guessed it, Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon's still about that 10%, so about 50% of these 4 archetypes. Roaring Moon is shifting again to a different archetype, going with the Lost Zone package, which did in fact get to a top 8 placement at LAIC in the Masters Division. Roaring Moon is an incredibly fast, aggressive archetype, and having the likes of the Lost Zone package with Radiant, Charizard, Sableye, and Cramorant has really good single price, strong attacking options to help your Gardevoir matchup and other single price sort of decks have much more stronger sort of matchup into you into them, which is very, very powerful. The big Iron Hand user Miraidon and Shenpal are definitely not as formidable as they once were at the start of the metagame. People are playing it quite a lot, but they've not been performing as well this weekend. Valiant is definitely a bit of a change of that. Obviously, winning the Juniors division in LAIC, as well as getting second place at LAIC as well. It's done incredibly well by definitely more focusing on the Entei package. One of my favorite decks to come out from last week, and as you know, I talked about it a ton. It's so exciting. It's just really nice to see that the archetype is constantly evolving. And Mew, Lost Zone, and even the likes of Golden Go are performing incredibly well as well. Lost Zone is an archetype which a lot of people have kind of wrote off completely because of Iron Hands. Well, people are kind of going back to the big basic with Vs and EXs and kind of adding the Iron Hands as well to help you in the mirror match, as well as other matchups as well, which honestly makes so much sense and it's very, very powerful. I love that the meta is constantly shaking up, as we can even see this in the top 6 performing archetypes happening there in Japan. Gardevoir is finally back at the #1 position. It's definitely had a slow climb from pretty much not being on the list at the start to all the way to the 1st position. It's doing incredibly well as we just look at this matchup wise overall. It's an incredibly well performing, very much in the top 8 and top 4 as well, getting 8 wins, which is incredible. Lost Zone Tina did fall down a little bit, but that's not to say about it. Just look at that final placements all the way to top 8. It's performing incredibly well, consistent to exactly why I love this archetype. Roaring Moon is definitely a good split between getting 6 wins in the Lost Zone package and 6 wins in the other one. Potentially next week, if we've seen the Roaring Moon definitely have that split sort of section, I'm going to be splitting up the results as it goes along. But I'm nice to see that Roaring Moon is performing incredibly well in this format. Charizard as well, again, it's doing incredible in Japan ever since it got released over in Rule of the Black Flame. It's done so well, and I love to see that kind of progressively go into it, which actually led me to even get some of these Charizards because they're just that powerful. Mew is definitely back into the fray. It definitely goes in and out constantly, but it does very, very strong. We saw over in LAIC the Excelgor package, which is very good against Charizard as well as Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon definitely didn't perform as well as a lot of people predicted it might do in LAIC, but having that Excelgor package really helps with that Charizard, which is another deck which Mew can really struggle with. And lo and behold, Lost Zone Box has finally entered the fray again by being in that #6 spot. Did pretty well overall, but definitely the more focused package is that likes with having Iron Hands, Iron Valiant, and Dragonite, as well as the rest of the classic Lost Zone sort of packages to go with it. It's very, very powerful. Sableye is one of the strongest attacks right now in the game and can really help against kind of gatekeep those single prize attacking options. Could we see Lost Zone Box really return and do as strong? Or because of the huge success about Iron Hands at LAIC, will it kind of disappear again as people really worry about how it's going to evolve? So without further ado, let's break down some of these creative archetypes. What better place to start off by looking at Palkia with Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant just makes so much sense in Palkia. It does that additional 20 more damage. That can mean Palkia can do nearly 300 damage, which is honestly just so good. It already played a ton of switching cards, and Shenpal is already a very strong sort of late game finishing sort of option in the deck. But Iron Valiant just helps you do that additional 20 more damage. That might mean one less energy to discard of Shenpal, or one less bench Pokemon you need for Palkia, especially if you're going against like likes of Entei for them to get any return KOs. It just makes so much sense. You have so much disruptive capability with higher counts of boss as well as judge, and having that Lost City just makes more sense as well. There's so many good like one of our archetypes in the sort of meta game, so getting rid of anything which kind of be worried about just makes so much sense. You still don't have the best Mew matchup, so definitely a Drapion makes a lot more sense in this. The archetype and having that cancelling clone option and higher counts of boss means that the cancelling clone Greninja play is always on point. I really love its archetype. It's very strong and really excited to potentially try this out. Lost Zone Tina, I mentioned before, but it has everything which you kind of normally see it. It's got the Disruption, got the 4 copies of Path of Speak, but wait, what's that? That's a Roaring Moon in this one. Basically, gives you additional Star Requiem for the entire game. It's not focusing on using the Greninja sort of aspect of what we're used to it. It's using having that Roaring Moon as a secondary attacker. It has 230 HP, which is already very, very strong. And obviously, Frenching Gouging gets an instant KO on anything on your opponent's side. This can make sure that you can pretty much get a Star Requiem 2 turns in the game because you can use Frenching Gouging followed by Star Requiem on Giratina. So you're not worried at all what's in the opponent's active Pokemon spot because you can instantly KO anything pretty much turn after turn. It's very, very strong, very, very powerful. I love the disruptive capability of the 2 Iono, Ron, Roxanne, and the 4 copies of Path of the Peak. So already very much focuses on what Tina really focuses on it, but having an additional other attacker is very, very strong. Roaring Moon as well, another looking at this one, looking at the Lost Zone package here. Like I mentioned before, it's very, very powerful having Roaring Moon as a real good powerful archetype, meaning you can have other really good secondary attackers. That Galarian Moltres means you can instantly put it into play with 2 energies on if they're already in your hand. And it has an amazing late game attack, 20 plus 50 for each of your opponent's prize cards they've taken. Very, very powerful. I like the Magma Basin, so you can power up your Charizard very, very early on. Having the Marsh Step and Mirage Gate again makes you attack with Charizard early, the double Clara, the escape, the Super Rod. There are just so many things for this once you're constantly streamlining your attackers turn after turn after turn. It's really exciting to see how this Roaring Moon archetype, it's kind of like gone all around. Like Roaring Moon is not just its own turbo version. There's a Lost Zone package. There's even the one with Giratina. It's just absolutely incredible to see how this really exciting archetype is always going to be developing and evolving. And like I mentioned before, looking a bit more Lost Zone sort of boxes here, we can see this is what some Lost Box decks have been performing well. We can see still plays the Drapion, still plays the double Sableye, double Cramorant, and also Dragonite, but it plays 2 of these future Pokemon, Iron Hands and Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant just makes a lot of sense. You're already playing a ton of switching cards in there. Getting that additional 20 more damage is really strong. All of a sudden, Sableye now can put 14 damage counters anywhere with the additional 2 damage counters on anywhere on your opponent's side. I really love having the Iron Hands in there because you've already got a ton of sort of energies in the play. You have Mirage Gate, so you can instantly get additional 2 more additional prize card. So you can go after Squawkabillies and take 3 prizes that way, and you can constantly be reusing them because you play a ton of a Super Rod. I really love this archetype. I think it's very, very strong. The Devolution and TM is incredible inclusion in the archetype as well. I think this could be a future of how we've seen Lost Box being played. I think definitely the big basics really helps you against other Roaring Moon as well, also other sort of Iron Hands archetypes. So you're not going to be relying on always having 2 prizes out there. You can have some big, beefy Pokemon that can get instant KOs on whatever your opponent may throw at you. Another deck I love, as you know, is Shenpal, but this is a really interesting winning list. This list plays obviously the classic Iron Hands, but only 1 Shenpal and 1 Slacking V, and 3 Paths of the Peak. So this list here is very aggressive on every sort of matchups. You can have a very, very weak sort of, as you know, Miraidon matchup, as well as also a not too strong Gardevoir matchup, I've noticed at times, and having that Iron Hands can be a little bit more convolution at times to constantly keep it in play, but the Slacking is very, very strong. Pretty much hitting for 260 damage is already very good, but its ability is so difficult. You can't attack if you've got 2, 4, or 6 prize cards, so Path to Peak shuts that off, and all of a sudden you've got a big, beefy Pokemon which can hit for 260 damage, pretty much nearly KOing anything on the format, which is very, very strong and very difficult to KO, but having that 230 HP and not having a relevant weakness, which is very, very powerful. I love this sort of inclusion of how Shenpal is evolving. Only one Shenpal does seem a bit risky, but you are very high on the disruptive capability with 3 Ionos and a Avery. So I absolutely find this is quite an interesting archetype. Could this be how Shenpal can kind of like go into the fray? We've already seen it did get top 16 at LAIC. Could we see it kind of evolve to add slacking and go to Path to Peak to help in other sort of matchups, because there isn't a really good path deck here, potentially? But this is a very interesting archetype as well, which I'm really glad to see some real good innovation in Shenpal still. Another one I talked about as we get to near the end of this thing is Golden Go. This is a really interesting second place list. It has so much going to it. It has the Gardevoir package, the Golden Go, as well as Mewtwo. So you can have Golden Go and Curliers. So you're instantly drawing so many cards as possible by drawing 2 cards of Golden Go in the active spot or 1 on the bench. And obviously the Curlier is if you discard a card, you get to draw 2. You have your Mewtwo, which is very, very powerful, having that big 310 HP, not affected by any sort of can go through anything on your opponent's side. You can do a huge amount of damage counters, do a huge amount of damage, get instant amount of healing. It's very, very powerful. I absolutely love this sort of innovation with Golden Go, with Gardevoir, and also Mewtwo V Union. There is a ton of stuff going to it. I think the Irida package is very strong because you can get any of your item cards as well as also your Mana Fees and your Radiant Greninja. I think having the work of the Boss's Orders, the Zinnia, the counter catch, there's so much going for this archetype. It's really interesting to see it performing incredibly well. Could we see this like innovation of Golden Go? Potentially. Could we see Mewtwo V Union kind of return? Potentially, but honestly, this archetype, there is so much going to it. It might actually see its more play because we have more discarding effect, superior energy retrieval, as well as also Ultra Ball, Dini's Resolve, and even Earthen Vessel. So you could get your Mewtwo V Union out as early as turn 2 or even turn 3, which is very, very scary to think about. And kind of looking at some other sort of archetypes performing very well, Thoroughbox is doing very, very well recently. It performed pretty well, got a couple second places, top 4s, top 8s. So Zoroark could potentially see some play. A lot of people thought it was going to return with having the reversal energy when you're behind in prizes. You have 3 special energies attached to it. You have a ton of stage 1 support. And honestly, it didn't get as well. But Sizzle was a really good inclusion. And a lot of people thought that might potentially save Zoroark. It didn't, spoiler, but Sizzle is very, very strong. 10 plus 50 more for each of your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability attached to it, So doing huge amount of damage where like the Lost Box, Shenpal, Gardevoir, even the likes of Miraidon, there are so many decks right now which have abilities, so this just makes so much more sense adding into it. You have some other very strong attackers like Cleavor, Scorvalon, even the Camerupt and Mightyena to really help you in your Mew matchup, as well as also Slowbro for that end game, late finish. I think this archetype is very strong. I think Zoroark is definitely very underrated. It's got a very, very good position right now in the metagame. It can constantly add anything you want to have. There are so many stage 1s to choose from, so Zoroark could be in there doing incredibly well in the rest of the future. And kind of looking at the sort of at the end of sort of list here, we're looking at this Lost Zone Dialga. Yes, Dialga V-Star has finally done pretty well because it hasn't done well for a very long time, I feel like. It's very, very strong. Having that V-Star ability, which V-Star attack, which makes sure you can attack again, and doing a ton of damage with its first additional attack. I really like the Energized TM to be added into the archetype because you can attach to a Cramorant, not using any energies for it, and it can energy accelerate to your multiple Dialgas, which is exactly what you need. Path to Peak to try and slow down your opponent. Avery, which as we saw in LAIC, is such a good inclusion in so many archetypes. It just makes that big disruptive capability and additional more cards you might potentially need. I love also the counter catcher because you're going to be using single prize Pokemon at the start, so you're going to go behind in prizes. So if you have an Augustine potentially block something in the active for quite a while, it's not too bad and not too shabby at all. I think this list is very interesting. I love to see Dialga perform pretty well overall. And potentially we could see it kind of evolve as it comes along. We've seen its success in the past in online events and Japan. It's never really had that time to shine, but seeing it get second place was very, very exciting. And finally, I want to look at some other sort of fun decks here. Solrock got a top 4. Yes, an archetype which a lot of people played for so much fun when it got released. I even played it quite a bit of it. I was so excited for this archetype, but it didn't really perform as well. That Lunatone doing 30 plus 30 more for each psychic energies attached to it. Your Solrock, 2 additional energy attachments to it. But having Earthen Vessel can really, really help with it. Path to the Peak, the team Pokemon League HQ, even having the likes of Countercatcher. There are so many new cards that kind of got added into Paradox Rift that can just make this deck just a little bit more better. The Raihan as well, very, very strong. Even the Defiance ban, because you're always going to be behind in prices for quite a bit. You are a single prize deck, so your opponent just have to run into you 6 times to get the win, where you in theory could only do between 2 or even like 4 attacks. So I really, really like how his archetype is kind of come back. This was the only Zoroark list that actually performed well, but again, looking at the creativity, adding some of the cards which we gained from Paradox Rift to an old existing archetype and performing pretty well in these events, it's exactly what I'm here for. And that's why I love the Pokemon trading card game, the constantly evolving of the metagame. And finally, let's look at the Serena lock list, which did in fact get top 4. I played against it at a league event happening last week, and honestly, it didn't really surprise me because it didn't get that setup it really required, but it is definitely a very scary archetype. Doing the additional all the damage counters onto your opponent's main HP is 30 is very, very scary. Having the Vanilla so your opponent can't actually attack you, even the Panic Mask as well, so you guarantee that extra protection if there is any ability lock, and having that Bravery just does 30 damage to anything that has damage counters on there is a really good late game finisher. This is a very, very strong, very, very scary archetype. I love having the Countercatcher because you're not going to be taking prizes very much early on in the game. You want to be healing with the likes of your Cheryl. You want to be constantly searching for anything with the likes of Irida, which just works incredibly well. That's why I think Vanillix is really, really strong, because you can instantly search for Rare Candy and the Vanillix piece. It's just very, very scary. It could be the next sort of a lock sort of archetype, the Rotom to help you in the early game. There's so much going for it. Getting that top 4 placement is definitely something which is quite unique to see. I'm loving that we're seeing that creativity with the likes of Serena, having that potential lock capability with having the Vanillix and the Panic Mask. Your opponent may not be able to touch your Serena while you spread loads of damage counter on, ready to set that Bravery to instantly win the game and take 6 prizes in a single turn. I love this archetype, and potentially it could see a bit more play. And finally, looking ahead, will LAIC's results really affect the City League results in the future? Like, will the results affect the results of City League? Potentially, yes. I've seen a lot of Japanese people talk about LAIC. We're seeing them loving the likes of Gardevoir and even the likes of Iron Hands as well, and Entei and Iron Valiant. We saw the likes of, even in the results just on the Sunday, so many people played the Mew archetype with the Excelgor. So many people played more Iron Valiant with Entei. So definitely we're going to see a little bit of results of a bleed into the Japanese and City League results. Will the creativity continue? I really hope so. I love innovation, like mid-game of like the metagame. We've had these cards for nearly a month now, and we're already seeing it constantly be evolving, constantly changing. We've seen already like the 4 big established archetypes, but could it constantly be evolving and changing? We're seeing that likes of Royal Moon, whereas likes of Giratina, Gardevoir, and even likes of Charizard are constantly a bit changing as well, but have a main established archetype. And will the meta shake up again? I really hope so. I'm excited to see that Gardevoir perform really well. I'm excited to see how Iron Hands might really like evolve right now. It did very, very well at LAIC. Could it continue and affect the results in the City League Championships? So thank you so much for watching the video. If you have enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below, what creative archetype are you excited to play out? Are you definitely more of a Roy Moon, Gardevoir, like tier 1 sort of archetypes? Or do you enjoy the fun ones like the Serena, like the Zoroark, heck, even likes of Diago and Solrock? These are really exciting archetypes. We're in such an exciting time for the Pokemon trading card game. It's the best time to get into it. And thank you again so much for the constant support on the channel. So you know I'm going to do this video, go do the LAIC breakdown as well. So if you haven't checked out any of those videos, check them out on my channel. And I will see you guys in a couple of days' time for another video. Bye for now.